Hello and welcome to episode 3 of All of the Day. This is Derek, and Setzer is actually off this week. I think he's out in the countryside somewhere. So replacing him is Chesten. Chesten, why don't you tell the people a little bit about yourself?
Hi, I am Derek's brother, and that is my defining characteristic.
Can you get into your profession at all? I know Setzer has let it be known that he's IT and I'm a journalist, just so people
I
know where your perspectives on things are.
I will just say that I am involved in education, and I'll let people do with that what they will.
That's very fair. So tell me about your week. How's your week gone?
Well, it's been a pretty quiet week. I had the week off that left what I thought was a lot of time to relax and unwind and play some games, perhaps. And in actuality, it was mostly a time to pack because I am preparing to move to a house and I am also extremely anal. So I like to pack early, even though it's going to be about 2 or 3 weeks till we can move. I have determined to get just about everything in boxes as quick as I can, which I have accomplished, but at the cost of what I thought would be a nice leisurely week. How was your freedom week?
Awful. I had internet problems all week to the point where it interfered with my work. So what would happen is my work software would freeze every 20 or 30 seconds, and Comcast was not very friendly about repairing it. I think I was talking to them for about 10 hours before they agreed to let me trade modems. They were like, well, bro, everything looks okay from our end. We don't need to fix anything. And then it was either that or, have you tried resetting your modem yet? And, and I felt bad because I wanted to yell at the people that are making like $15, well, not 15, like making like $10 an hour to talk to me. I just wanted to yell at them like, I've reset my modem. Just let me let me do something. I need to work. So eventually I got that sorted, but it was a
Really makes
pain.
me That kind of stuff makes me yearn for the days of no responsibility when I was young and when you were young and I was working at my first job. And when the internet went out, I couldn't do my job and I just said, all right, well, I'm leaving. And that was that
Yeah,
because
that would be great. I wish that was an
tho-
option.
those were the days.
Uh,
Now you would get fired or something.
I would have just gladly sat on the couch and played something or watched anime or something, but nope. I just had to talk with Comcast on the phone for hours, and once I got that sorted, the week got better. But I haven't had a lot of time to play much this week. I've mostly just played like Horizon Zero Dawn and its DLC. I finished it. I finished it yesterday. The game really got done a disservice by releasing around Breath of the Wild. It got kind of lost in the hype because it's just another open world game where Breath of the Wild was a different Zelda. I don't think Breath of the Wild did anything too crazy outside the box. Unlike some people, it was definitely different for a Zelda. And when you get different for a Zelda, it gets people's attention. So I feel like Horizon Zero Dawn got kind of lost, and that's a shame because it's just totally great. It was if I had to think about my top 10 from 2017, it would definitely be on there, and that's a very loaded year.
It's pretty high on my personal list of I feel like the word regret is a little strong for a video game that I didn't play much of, but I played it right around launch. I got it for my birthday, and I had just finished Breath of the Wild, or I was at least playing Breath of the Wild at the same time, and that proximity made me just totally bounce off of it because even though maybe I mean, you're saying it's not radical, I'm not sure I totally agree, but in terms of just the flexibility, the movement, the things you could do in Breath of the Wild,
It's
you know,
radical for
little
Zelda.
little things like climbing up every mountain. I mean, I know everybody hates the climbing, but the fact that there was really no surface you couldn't amble over in the game. There's no obstacle that you like. There's no set path for anything. And then when you play Horizon, I remember getting to some very, very early, like as soon as the game opens up, it was something where you go to like a gate. And in Breath of the Wild, I could have gone on top of the gate and around it or something, but in Horizon, I had to walk up and talk to this guy. And it was just like having all that freedom and then playing something without it.
Horizon's a lot more gated, I should say. It's a lot more
It
traditional.
It is. It's more traditional, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. And I think the impression I've gotten is that the story or the narrative in there is compelling.
The lore is really interesting. It's the best part of the game. It's like a really
Yeah,
interesting future.
and
Uh,
I definitely think I didn't give it enough of a fair shake. And hearing you, of all people, who does not tend to adore anything open world. It has definitely made me think about when the time comes when I can play it again, or maybe when the sequel's about to come out, maybe going back and giving that another fairer shake.
I mean, hell, it's not only open world, but it's like a Western AAA game, which I am very iffy about these days. So
And
the fact that I'm
it's a
speaking highly about it says something, I would say.
it's a Sony AAA game,
Oh, I
which you're
know.
especially not fond of.
No, no. Well, this one, the sad dad dies at the beginning of the game, so you
Yes.
don't have to deal with that.
Oh, oh no. I have to cut that
Yes.
out. That's a spoiler.
It's a this. Oh yeah, this game's getting ported to PC. So there might actually be people that haven't played it yet. Well, I apologize for spoiling this 4-year-old game, but I promise you that that happens in the first like couple hours. So
Spoiling the prologue of this game that is by this in this era of quarantine might as well be 1,000 years old.
you can get through it pretty quickly, like 40 hours. I feel, which is
Eh,
I know 40 hours isn't quick, but when you like go on Reddit and stuff, like when you say a game's only 40 hours long, they freak out. If you want it to be longer, you can get all the little knickknacks and stuff. But I did most of the side quests, most of the main story, and it took me about 40, and I got no complaints.
I am glad to hear it and sad to hear that I was so short-sighted back in 2017 or whenever that was. Again, 1,000 years ago.
Well, what have you been playing this week?
It's a lot of things. So one thing I should probably have mentioned up front is that I am a new parent, which I have found dramatically changes what and when I play games. And on top of that, with the moving, that has been another thing that's really, it hasn't made me play less games, it's just made me play less of a lot of different games. So since I packed all the boxes, I did pack away any actual consoles. So the only thing I've been able to play is on my Switch,
Which is not an actual console.
which is not an actual console. It's a portable. It's a handheld device.
What is this,
I
like your eighth Switch?
No, surprisingly, no. So
For those that don't know, which is everyone, Chesten here bought a Switch Lite last year and then sold it like a week after buying it. So this is actually his third Switch.
it was a complicated situation. I have a tendency to get really into new technology, and then in the case of the Switch Lite, it wasn't losing interest. It was one of those things. A lot of people who make impulse decisions stick with them, but I am very, like I said, anal, so I try to reverse them. But back then, I was the only person who played my Switch. But then this little thing came called Animal Crossing came out and swept the world and my wife by storm. And so I started to realize that I couldn't play my Switch because anytime I thought about it, I would look over and it was being used for Animal Crossing. We have two Switches. We have a Switch Lite, which we got recently, and like I said, the original reason for that was because she was playing Animal Crossing, and I needed that. I needed another Switch so I could actually play through what has become a giant backlog of Switch games over the past few years of buying digital games. And I had bought recently like Dragon Quest 11, haven't got to that. I still have several games from last year, Pokemon Shield, Final Fantasy 8 Remastered, didn't touch them at all. So I got that second Switch thinking this would be my opportunity, and what's happened is that the real benefit of the second Switch has been that it has made playing Clubhouse games with my wife a near nightly occurrence because we are ancient, and now that we have a
Yeah.
kid, we are old people.
So
We
yeah.
just about every night we gather around by our TV like it's a nice little fireplace. She pulls out her Switch, I pull out mine. I load up Clubhouse Games, and she loads up the Guest Pass, which allows anybody to play multiplayer with whoever owns Clubhouse, and we play cards. We play cards on
Wow.
our Switch. Variety of card games. We're really into President. It is a pretty simple card game where you're just placing higher value cards, but I don't think anybody wants to hear me describe card games.
Probably not.
But probably not. I would tell you some fascinating president stories, but I really don't think anybody besides us wants to hear them. But
Are
I
they
will
about
tell you,
Taft?
no, it is a hoot. Every time you play, you just never know what's going to happen next.
Oh my.
Um, I can't communicate enough how good this card game is. So that's been probably the main game, just because it's really easy to, play. We usually say we're going to play one round and we play like 8 or 10 rounds. But usually after we have dinner, after the baby's to sleep, we'll do that for a little bit and then we go off to bed because we're old. So that has been the main thing. But like I said, I've kind of bounced and dabbled with a lot of things.
I don't know. Is Chesten Jr. good at the card games yet? Like, can he
Uh,
can he play poker?
well, Chesten Jr. really is into systems that can play at a 4K resolution.
Oh,
So
so no.
so he so when he sees me pull out, especially the Switch Lite, which at best is pulling 720p, he just starts to wriggle around in his little seat. Yeah, when I played Pokemon Shield and I got to that wild area and I connected to the internet and the frame rate went below 30, I mean, you can bet I was hearing about it. He
He was
was,
like, "This input latency is unacceptable, Dad."
why wouldn't they lock the frame rate, Dad? Dad, it doesn't make sense. Surely it can hit 30.
What is Game Freak thinking? So lazy.
What are they thinking?
Other than your stupid card games, what else have you been playing?
So, like I said, I've tried to keep new and current. And so I tried a demo, which came out this week for a new Switch game. It is an indie game. It is called Neon Abyss. And this is one of those indie games. I tend to like me a good indie game on the Switch when they're well done, of course. There's plenty of trash out there, but plenty of great things.
How sad do you
Um,
get when you play this?
well, not sad for the reasons that you would expect. It is not the traditional sad platformer. It does win indie game bingo in another way though, because it is, and you can stop me when you've heard this before. It is a pixelated
Holy shit!
roguelike,
Oh my god!
and that is its calling card.
Breaking
It's
new
kind of
ground.
it's supposed to have, I think, I, from what I've gathered, it is supposed to have kind of that wacky feel. Kind of, I'm trying to think, not Hotline Miami, which had its own very unique style like that, but if it were done by someone who didn't understand why they did that style in Hotline Miami, which obviously is going to sound pretty harsh. Really, the two that I've heard people compare it to, which I've played both of, are Enter the Gungeon. I think you bought it. I don't know if you've ever played it. I played quite a bit.
I've played it. It's okay.
It's fine. I kind of like it. That game was a little quirky, but I always found that every time you played, you were getting different weapons, something new. So every run felt kind of fresh. It was very bullet hell.
Hey, you just
So,
described roguelikes. Every run feels fresh. That's the
well, not
genre.
no, no, no. I'm getting to that. Every run in that game felt fresh. You're getting new weapons. The humor was a little bit hit and miss for me personally, but that wasn't what I was there for. I like the bullet hell elements. I like that kind of stuff, even though I'm bad at it. I like when you do get in a rhythm, it always feels very good. The other one people compare it to is Binding of Isaac, which I detest.
I don't
I
like that
just
either.
do not like that game. Yeah, I understand that people have played, 2,000 hours of it at this point across its, 20 different iterations. I can't get past the art style. It's got that internet sense of humor that
And it's got, well, you can just call it the Reddit sense of humor. It's pretty
it yeah,
much
it
just
it's a very yes, it's a very of the internet, of the Reddit's type of
like
game.
you're waiting for like the bacon and the Chuck Norris to pop out.
To me, it is the antithesis of what I want in a game. It is too much of what it is trying to be. And this game, I don't even like as much as that. It just feels flat. And maybe it's a demo, so maybe it's supposed to be coming out soon, so I don't think it's early in development, but maybe they've held back a lot. But I found like in the few runs I played, the guns I was getting didn't feel dramatically different because it's a side scrolling, so it's a little bit different. It's not top down, it's side scrolling. You go, back and forth between different rooms, traversing a map like a Metroidvania almost. And in each room, you're finding treasure, or, it's a roguelike. You're doing the same kind of things. You're finding treasure or these little knickknacks that at this point in the game, you won't understand what they do, but eventually you'll have an idea. You're getting, I guess, the one unique thing it's probably not unique, but I've never played a roguelike with a similar mechanic, is you'll get eggs, which will hatch think like Chow, but not as fun. So you'll get these little eggs that follow you, and then eventually they hatch. And sometimes they hatch into something that gives you different power ups or perks. Usually, it just increases your movement speed, your strength, or things like that. When I was playing it, I was like, this game is slow. I like my roguelikes to be kind of fast. Like Dead Cells is a game I really like. That's a very fast-paced action game. There's really not a lot of waiting between things. And this game was moving kind of slow, and I finished a boss, and it tells you your movement speed's increased, your power's increased. And I got through a few stages, and it kept saying those things are increasing, but it just feels so slow to me. And I didn't stop because I died or had a bad run. I stopped because it wasn't clicking. I didn't feel like a compulsion to keep playing, which I would say for a game that's designed for you to play several times is maybe not the best.
So the demo
So
didn't win you over.
it did not win me over. I was pretty disappointed because I had seen some things that indicated that it would be pretty cool. It has the backing of a publisher that does pretty good work, Team 17,
Oh,
who
Worms
publishes
guys.
Worm. They publish Overcooked, which is a game that my wife and I play and we like quite a bit. So I thought maybe this would be of a quality because they were backing it, but at least in the demo, I'm not getting that impression. I'm not gonna buy it, of course, but I'll wait and see if the impressions from the actual release are maybe any better. If maybe the style pokes out a bit more, because that was kind of disappointing too. The whole thing is it's neon abyss. So in the trailers, there's stuff like this character dancing at a disco, and so you get the impression like, oh, neon abyss. I bet the music's gonna be really lively while you play through it.
Right.
It's gonna have some kind of rhythm, and I can't. I mean, I didn't have my volume cranked or anything, but it was really quiet. The game was really quiet. Like it was like I could hear all my gunshots and stuff. It just
Ambient
didn't do
noise.
it didn't do anything I expected it to do. So I guess it subverted my expectations in a really
So it's a
bad way.
masterpiece.
It's so maybe I'm an idiot and it's great, but I'm not feeling this game. Not
Well,
at least not for me.
a couple thoughts on that. One, I don't know why they make roguelikes anymore. I mean, they've already made the perfect one, Rogue Legacy. They're making a sequel to that. I don't think they need to make any more. I think they've mastered the genre. But second, like, I'm tired of these retro throwback pixelated games. Like, we've done that style over and over again.
Yeah,
I've experienced the 16-bit era enough. Let's get some crappy PS1 graphic games up. That I have
I'm
some nostalgia for.
yeah, I think I'm with you. I think, between Shovel Knight and The Messenger, there's plenty of others I just can't think of. Those are the two that always come to my mind. Like Shovel Knight trying to get the 8-bit era, Messenger has 8-bit and 16-bit. I really don't think anybody's going to do better than either of those two games.
Shovel Knight is
So
better than several Mega Man games. So
Shovel Knight is better than most games that have come out this decade.
yeah,
So I think it's fair to say that if we moved into that PS1 era, we start having Crash likes, people making
that's
uh,
okay. They can make a good Crash.
people making Quest 64 ripoffs. Like we get to that period,
Oh
you
man, a
know,
Glover, bring it back, baby.
a Glover, because especially if you look back at that era, it's not like especially fondly remembered by most people. So if you start making these indie games, there's a good chance you're gonna make something that's better than most of those games.
Oh, without a doubt. Those
Especially,
games, yeah,
yeah, they have not aged well.
no.
16-bit games are great, so you're comparing against like a really amazing backlog. 32-bit, 64-bit, you're comparing against some pretty spotty games. Might be a good thing to do if you're looking to break into the industry. Just that's our tips. Not that we're experts, but it's
Well,
worth something.
I touched on it last week about Crash and my feelings of it not being good. I would say that Spyro surprised me by being good from that era. So if they made a spiritual successor to Spyro, it may not reach those heights, but otherwise it could be open season. uh,
I think a Spyro could definitely do better. I think they could certainly improve on
I
Spyro
really
just by
enjoyed the trilogy. I'll say that.
I do too. I was a big fan as a kid, and I do quite like the remastered trilogy as well. I haven't finished all of it, but I'm imagining it holds up pretty well.
It is simple, but that's okay. Not every game
It's
needs to have a RPG mechanics, you know.
No, but I think looking at Crash 4, the little bit I've seen, I think the thing that makes me think that that game could be good and does make me interested in that game is it looks like Crash is going to have a much wider variety of abilities. In Crash 1, 2, and 3, he's pretty set. He can slide. He can do that Tasmanian Devil tornado thing,
Yeah,
and he can die even though he's not touching even a single pixel of an enemy. And those are his abilities. And
that's a fun
so,
one.
yeah, that's my favorite. I really loved that when I was trying to 100% Crash 2. But Crash 4, it seems like whatever I watched the trailer once. It didn't leave like a huge impression on me, but I did take away that it seems like there's a little more going on. And I think if someone did a Spyro, and I think if I had to guess, not an industry insider, but I'm speculating that if Crash 4 does well, a Spyro 4 wouldn't be very far behind.
No,
And I
that's
think,
gonna happen.
yeah, I think the adding a little bit to that would probably benefit it.
Well, if you
But
remember, adding the crash made it worse because Rafa Cortex was a disaster, and then every other one after that. I guess people like Twin Sanity, but I am not going to ever play it, so I'm just going to take their word for it. So for some of those, keeping it simple is ideal.
this is true. In the meantime, maybe some indie can come along and make a spiritual successor to Spyro while we wait on Crash 4 to the dust to settle on that one. Um,
Well, is there anything else you've been playing?
yes, I wanted to mention briefly very new, fresh game, Smash Brothers Ultimate.
That's very new.
I've Well, I only bring it up because there is a new character, of course, and I'm sure you've played at least a little bit with
Yes.
Min Min from everybody's favorite Nintendo Switch franchise, ARMS. And I have to say, I was actually just playing before we were recording, and I played as Min Min with some friends, and I think the remark that we made is pretty accurate, that Min Min the character is more fun than the entire game of ARMS.
Absolutely. Min Min
So
rules.
so Sakurai has done really great work, I think, capturing the ideas of ARMS. Like when you see ARMS and you're like, oh, that could be fun. A boxing game where you've got these extendable arms that you can aim. He took that idea and made a Smash Brothers character out of it that is fun for more than 3 matches, which is more than I can say for ARMS the game.
I was really
I,
down on Min Min when she was announced just because I just don't care about arms at all. But when I actually got to play as her, I'm like, well, this is a worthy addition. And then it made me reflect, like, it's good for franchises like ARMS, like, to get a representation in Smash because they're not bigger than some of the other ones, but it's good to have some variety in there.
it is nice. It's kind of That's always been one of the cooler things about Smash Brothers is not just the third party, the getting your Cloud or your Terry Bogard, not really the biggest name, but it's not about getting all those people as much as it sometimes is like just pulling from Nintendo's very deep back catalog and saying like, hey, you remember Captain Falcon, the guy who drove that car in F-Zero? Well, what if he was a fighter? And now it's, hey, you remember that game ARMS that probably some people bought, but most people forgot because it wasn't that fun? Well, what if we made a character out of that? And that's been fun to see. Not my favorite character, but I think it has been a valuable addition to Smash Brothers just because, like the past several DLC characters, it just doesn't play like really any other character in the game.
They've knocked them out of the park. All the newcomers have been great.
Yeah, I think I've seen some people I actually earlier saw somebody complaining about the DLC and just the price of it, which I don't think is fair. When you think like when you look back on all the value that's been added so far, it's not like Dragon Ball Fighters, which is a fine game, but the DLC is 19 Gokus, and at some point they're only so different. This has been characters that have covered the gamut from, you have Banjo for Western audiences. You have all of these characters like Joker, Hero that are very focused on their Japanese audience,
You have Marfs
but
from Three Houses.
you have Mars from Three Houses, which appeals to 5 people on the internet who still want Fire Emblem characters. You have interest-wise, you cover everyone, but even the characters that you don't have an interest in. Like I haven't played Persona, so I can't say I'm a huge Persona fan. I like the style, and Fatal Fury is not my favorite fighting game by any means. I've always been more of a Capcom person. Regardless, their characters are always different enough that I find myself getting really drawn into them and wanting to play more with them. And in some cases, I want to learn more about the characters, which thankfully Sakurai provides history lessons with all his videos. So I don't need to go very
Well,
far to get those history lessons.
well, these crossovers are good at getting people interested in franchises like they may not have cared about before. Like I
For
remember
sure.
back on the 3DS, like Project X Zone was a big crossover game with I think Sega, Capcom, and
Hmm.
Namco. One of the characters in there made me interested to play God Eater, and it's something I never even heard of before.
Sure,
But
yeah.
it's just an example of that.
I mean, you were the only person who played Project X Zone, so it couldn't have been very successful.
No, no, yeah. I mean, whenever see people talk about it online, they talk about that it's good, and I don't think they actually played it because Project X Zone is really not good, and it doesn't take any strategy. But I mean, it's a fun little crossover game, and the story's cool. But no, that game is not good. Smash Brothers is a far better crossover style game.
I think we
Totally
can,
different playing, but
for sure. I think we can both agree to that. It's always been a big franchise for us, and it's been
for
nice
sure.
to have this elongated DLC period that has made this game stick around even longer than it. I mean, we were probably going to be playing it for years anyways, but it's nice to have these incremental updates that really make you want to jump back in.
I mean, the only fault I can think is that I feel like Captain Falcon is more synonymous with Smash Brothers than F Zero at this point. Same with Ness. That as a big Earthbound guy, it's kind of bothersome, but I mean, it's true. People think of Captain Falcon, they don't think of the Blue Falcon driver. They think of Falcon Punch and Falcon Kick.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of characters that owe their continued existence to Smash Brothers.
Hell, the entire existence of Fire Emblem in North America is owed to Smash Brothers.
And soon, the continued relevance of ARMS will be owed to Smash Brothers.
So now we're gonna start with our news segment. So first, I want to get the serious stuff out of the way so we can get back to laughing later. I would like to say rest in peace to Byron Bernstein, who is known as Reckful. He was a World of Warcraft player. He committed suicide this week. He died at the age of 31. It's a very sad situation, so we don't really have much to say about it, but just rest in peace.
Yeah, I don't know. He's a WoW streamer. I guess a very popular WoW streamer. From what I can tell, I've never watched his stuff. I'm not really. I don't watch many streamers, and I really don't watch World of Warcraft streams. But everything I saw was spoke pretty highly of him, and I think what was really good to hear is that he was someone who struggled with mental health issues, but he also used his platform to speak about it and to give other people a platform to share their experiences so they didn't feel so alone. So it
Yeah,
was nice to hear that he was a Twitch streamer who used his position to try and contribute to make people's lives a little bit better. Because I think we're kind of used to a lot of influencer types. It ends
yeah.
up them being a little lousy in some regards. And I would say that Reckful seemed like a kind person, a person who struggled, but a person who shared those struggles and made a difference to plenty of people. And I think you definitely saw that bear out with there are a lot of memorials for him across different World of Warcraft servers.
It sort of reminded me of Etika, like how people rallied around him as a person
Hmm.
afterwards. It's a very 31 is way too young to die. It's a very sad
Absolutely.
situation.
Yeah. And
But
hopefully people will take away from this the value of sharing those experiences, those mental health issues, not keeping them bottled up, because I think especially not just our culture, but a lot of cultures, but thinking specifically from our perspective, our American perspective, a lot of times people think that you should really keep those feelings bottled up, you should deal with them yourself, but that obviously isn't productive. That usually doesn't end well. It means that people feel like they're alone and they're fighting by themselves. But when you share like he did, you can really help people out and you help yourself out because you're sharing your own experiences and getting those out there instead of bottling them up. So hopefully people do take that from his life.
we see a lot online about people like trying to bring awareness to mental health, and I've always felt like they try to bring awareness to like the kind and cuddly mental health. Like, not that
Hmm.
that is such a thing, but I mean like it's stuff that that it isn't obvious that person is suffering. It isn't obvious that person's like going through like gigantic mood swings. Like, we see a lot of people like talk about self care and anxiety. Like, I suffer from anxiety personally, and it
Hmm.
sucks. But there's a lot of other people that share that, and I
Hmm.
feel like someone that's sharing like a less friendly mental illness is helpful. So
Hmm.
This person will be missed. Moving on, EVO Online got canceled because of accusations against the founder, Mr. Wiz, whose real name is Joey Queller. Forgiveness if I mispronounce that. I've never actually heard his real name pronounced. I've only read it before. It's mostly involving underage, so I'm not going to delve into that. But obviously, we condemn it. As a result, it has shut down Evo this year. Companies have pulled out left and right. Capcom, NetherRealm, whoever made them's Fight in Herds, just all sorts of people dropping out. And really, the whole fighting game community got like hit hard this week. Over a dozen players have had something come out about them, and it's probably going to shake up the community for a considerable amount of time.
It's part of a wave of accusations the past few weeks. It's been all over wrestling, comics, video games, the fighting game community now, and
Yeah,
it's obviously it's horrible that it has happened, and it's probably happened and been enabled for years. It's good that it is finally coming to light, and I think in this case, I think it was the right move to so quickly pull support from Evo because I don't know about you. We've never been to Evo, of course. We both watch it, but I've always viewed Evo as a pretty positive experience,
yes,
a pretty positive showcase. You know, there's a lot of bad things about the fighting game community, but Evo is a very nice thing. It's you see a lot of people who really care, the players, the commentators who put their livelihood into making this event the best they can. So when you
yeah.
have someone at the top who manipulates it for such poisonous intent, it seems like it's the right time to put it on hold and then hopefully in the future call out these things as they're happening and then hopefully move forward and continue to make Evo a positive experience for everybody.
Well, I 100% agree that it's the right call. This guy was at the very top of the ladder of Evo, and he's
Hmm.
being replaced. And odds are, like the people that are replacing him or working under him. So who knows if like there's some like trickle down as far as scumminess goes. So I feel like they need to take this time to like sort themselves out and get things like together and back on track.
Heartbreaking. Our hearts go out to the victims in these cases, and we understand that this is just a part of society and will probably continue on, but we're hoping that it continues to get better and get better as more and more people are held accountable. Um, and it's always hard to transition out of these kind of things because these are the kind of things that really weigh on your mind. I know it's kind of sat on my mind a little bit the past few days for sure, but there are other things happening that we are going to talk about, much less serious things, much lighter things, much less important things. That is the business that is video games. So we will take it to a lighter note. So what do you
Speaking of
have?
unimportant stuff,
There
let's
we
talk
go.
about this. They're making another battle royal. Can you believe it?
I can, but I kind of wonder. Maybe set it up first. What is this new battle royale experience
Well, it's
to
called
which you refer?
Hyperscape. Uh,
Okay,
it's set in a cyber future, it says, and
okay.
what I've seen it compared to is Ready Player One, which is doesn't tell me anything because Ready Player One is just like a digital world that looks like the real world. So is that what's going on here? I don't know. Apparently, it plays like Apex Legends, which I have not played much of, but I didn't really enjoy the little bit I did because I'm not really a shooter guy. Do you have anything to say about this zany game?
I mostly just a comment. If you think about, we have the PUBGs, considered by some like the original of this run of battle royale games. It was the first one to really click with a lot of people. Then we had the Fortnites, which just stole everything PUBG did, more or less, and gave it a little cartoon aesthetic. Added all the fun little dances and the skins and the stuff that the kids like. And then we have the Apex Legends, which I understand appeals to some people. I've never really been able to pin down its audience, but it has a following of sorts. So I feel like you have your three bases really covered. Oh, and then you have your Call of Duty Warzone,
Yeah.
which is you all talked about dad games.
It's a
Call of
dad
Duty
game.
kind Call of Duty is a dad game, so Warzone is the dad's battle royale of choice, I have to imagine.
Maybe that's one I could
So
play. People with poor reflexes.
it might be. I can say that I started it one day and then I decided that I was really not interested in starting another battle royale. But my point is, all those aside, is what is there really room left for more? I feel like people kind of find what they like as far as battle royales go and stick with it. The people who play Apex are still playing Apex. The people who play PUBG, PUBG is huge in China. Like it's one of the biggest games in the world still. It's not as much in America anymore, but it's still pretty big. The children love Fortnite and dads love Warzone. So who's left for these publishers? I don't know who they're trying to swoop in and get because I just can't imagine them shaking them from any of these other four games.
Well, to reference an extremely wise man, Cliff Bleszinski, I believe when he was making his Overwatch like, I forget what it was called off the top of my head.
Lawbreakers.
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 He had a quote out there that was saying something like, "There's only so much room for like you if we're lucky, we're the number two," and it turns out that there was only room for one Overwatch like, and it's Overwatch.
Overwatch.
So, so with the battle royales, we already have a pretty crowded market with things that are pretty popular. Like I don't know how popular Red Dead Online is, but I don't hear it talked about in the same way I do about these other battle royals.
Oh
So,
yeah, that does have better. Yeah, I don't ever hear about that mentioned.
and that's
I
like one of
think,
the biggest games of the recent memory. So you'd figure that
yeah,
would be an easy like, all right, we got Red Dead, might as well play. But I don't hear as much about that. So I
yeah,
feel
and
like the big ones are already taken. So if a new battle royale doesn't do something like extremely innovative, which from what I have seen, this does not look particularly innovative. It looks like Apex Legends with a different art style to me. I don't think there's room for it.
yeah, and I think one of the things that really jumped out when I read the big press release, it was leaked, I think, a day before it was officially announced. The thing that really stuck out to me is it seemed a little complicated. Like I think what I like, because I do like the idea of a battle royale, and what I really liked when I was playing PUBG or I dabbled in Fortnite was those games are pretty simple. You
Yeah.
you kind of know what you're getting. You every match is follows a similar template. You get in, you loot, you shoot, you die, and then you start over.
Some
And
12-year-old
it's
kills you.
right. You some 12-year-old builds this amazing tower, and you can't build anything because you're old. But when I was reading this one, it just seemed like it was too much. Like it was you die, but you when you die, you don't die. So you don't just queue for the next game. So
That's
immediately
already
I
the
was out.
problem. You can't have that.
Immediately I was out. You don't queue for the next game. Instead, you hang around as like a spirit,
That's not
and
going to
then
fly.
it was super complicated because you had to like meet up with a teammate at a certain location, and I was just thinking this is a lot of moving pieces. And I think when you're playing these online games, especially battle royales, I don't know how many people actually mic up for these kind of things. And I think you would almost have to mic up for that level of cooperation. I think Apex has some like non-verbal communication that works pretty well, but I don't think it has anything quite as complex as this system where you're dying and existing in this purgatory state and trying to locate a certain pad in the overworld where you can both revive. I just can't see that succeeding as a battle royale because it just seems like a lot to ask of a player.
Well, I know that I personally don't enjoy battle royales, but when I have played a couple of them, and the one thing I do like is that when I die, inevitably in the first 20 people, I can immediately start a new game.
Yeah, you queue
That's
up.
the
Yeah,
appeal. That's what's fun about like Tetris 99. Like I played that
yeah.
last night to unlock the Xenoblade stuff, and I'm like,
Hmm.
yes, I'm losing like in the 80s sometimes, but I can just go new game right away. Old games, erase, doesn't matter anymore. That's part of the fun. And if you take that
Yeah.
out, I just don't know. But it's Ubisoft. There,
I,
I don't have a high opinion of them anyway. So
I think it'll be I think it'll be a flop. I should mention because I hate to think that anybody would think that we would be so uneducated about the royale genre, but I am aware, and maybe you're not, but you are now, that Warzone has a similar feature where you die and you battle in the gulags. But from what I understand, that's a lot less complicated.
What
But
the hell's Warzone?
well, maybe we should move on before the kids attack us because we clearly are out of our depth.
I guess so. I mean, you might as well just be speaking French. I've never heard of it. It's just another of these battle royale clones. Like, what are we going to
Uh,
talk about next? Like the endless survival games. You want to talk about Rust now? I mean,
Arc.
yeah, let's go. Game Pass, baby.
Dinosaurs.
Well, we've already talked about how like we had an E3 a few weeks ago, and apparently games keep getting announced. We have this, and now what Xbox apparently is teasing, or not teasing, they registered some trademarks for Fable, Perfect Dark, and some other things. How do you feel about this?
I am really conflicted. So, Fable, I think, has been a foregone conclusion for a while. I think that though that series did not end on the best of terms,
Didn't start on the
Fable
best of
3,
terms.
No, it did not. It middled on the best of terms. Fable 3 was not especially popular. I think your wife is the only person who likes it.
Yes, the only
And
person I've ever met
Fable,
who has something good to say about Fables 3.
probably nobody remembers Fable The Journey, which was the Connect game.
I remember
That
it.
was it was the on rails game that had like very little to do with what anybody liked about Fable, or should I say what they liked about Fable 2, because again, the only Fable that really did much of anything for anybody from what I've gathered. That one I could understand. I feel like there is enough residual nostalgia for Fable 2 at this point. It's over 10 years old, or it is 10 years old now, I think, maybe a little bit older. So
It's got to be older.
people are fond of that. It's not much older, but it's a little bit older, I think. Perfect Dark though, and you mentioned this on the last podcast, but I can't personally understand what a new Perfect Dark would be. I like the idea of like Perfect Dark. You have much more fondness for it than I was fond of it, but you had a background. You played with friends. You had these long, epic evenings of playing Perfect Dark. I mostly just played it with you,
I played
and
hours and hours.
it was fun at the time, but shooters at the time were not especially good. So your Perfect Darks and your Golden Eyes really seemed amazing at the time. But
But
when
when
you
you go
think about what
back,
makes Perfect Dark special, what makes Perfect Dark special? Like what about that series would make people go like, "Oh, I really want that to come back," because I feel like everything it did is done now by a million other shooters way better.
well, yeah, I think the big thing about it at the time was secondary fire for a console game. Like you could turn your laptop gun into a sentry, and secondary fire is done all over the place now. It's
Secondary
really
fire is everywhere. It
yes.
extends outside of regular shooters.
I played like
I,
5 minutes of Doom Eternal, and immediately you can use secondary fire, so it's
yeah,
everywhere.
I can't fathom what a new Perfect Dark would be, especially given that Perfect Dark Zero was such a non-starter on the
Perfect Dark
360.
Zero is bad.
Yeah, and I actually played Perfect Dark pretty recently. It was on Game Pass, so I just fired it up one night. I was like, "Oh, Perfect Dark." Uh, our youngest brother was in town, and I thought, "Oh, this will be fun to play co-op." And it wasn't. Like it's just not like it is not a shooter that holds any appeal anymore because there's nothing special about it.
Well,
The
shooters from that
sequ
age, particularly console shooters, have aged like milk, I'd say. Because like at least with like PC shooters like Doom and Quake, I find those to be extremely playable because of the not only the frames per second, which is 60, but also like the mouse and keyboard controls. I think Perfect Dark and GoldenEye control like garbage. Like you can't go back. You got to have dual sticks, and even with the Xbox dual stick controller for Perfect Dark, it's still like it just doesn't. It just feels ancient, feels slow.
it doesn't work right. The only thing I can think is if you made a new Perfect Dark, would you be bringing back blurry vision to the modern age? Like,
God,
would you be
it's
making people throw up in VR? You could put it in VR.
suicide.
There's no VR for the Xbox, but they could change that. Perfect Dark could be the pioneer. You could get sick with Perfect Dark VR. That's
Well,
the only thing I can think.
I think for retro style shooters to make a comeback, you have to care about their lore. And I personally couldn't tell you a thing about Perfect Dark's story.
I
I'm sure,
remember it being quite dumb.
yes, I'm sure there's someone out there that loves Joanna Dark and they're really sad that like a game about her sister. I think it's like Scarlet Dark or something like that. Velvet Dark. That's what it was. Velvet Dark never came out. I don't know. Like you could make another GoldenEye shooter because people like James Bond. So even if it played like generic garbage, it's got James Bond, so people will play it. But
Yeah, there's a reason for that. Yeah.
for Perfect Dark, like I don't think Joanna Dark's big enough a name where people are going to come, for it.
It should be mentioned that of the two, they both had secret Twitter accounts, which are followed by Xbox team members, which is where the credibility came from. But I don't believe that Perfect Dark had a trademark
Oh,
to go
okay.
with it. But I don't really know that that really matters. I wouldn't be surprised if that was something they wheeled out,
I would
but
honestly say Perfect Dark at this point is like Banjo's 3E, where it's rumored all the time and it just nothing ever comes of it.
it
Because
is,
like
and it should
I
probably
feel
stay that
like
way.
Banjo's 3 Grunty's World or whatever is like every E3 leak every year it's on there, and it's never been there. And I think Perfect Dark get that a lot too. Like basically, any rare game anyone remembers fondly is always on fake leaks. Conquer all the time. Uh,
And I think we should come out as a staff, or a staff of people. We're not a staff really. We should come out as people on this podcast and say, if you are sitting at home thinking, well, I would really like to see Perfect Dark return, I want you to think about Battletoads. I want you to think about what your wishing got you, and
Sweet art style.
really think hard about whether or not you want Perfect Dark to come back with whatever weird gangly art style a weird secondhand Microsoft studio would put on it.
Well,
Just think
apparently
about it.
90s art styles aren't cool. They want to go with the generic CalArts art style where every cartoon looks the exact same now. The big rumor about these is that they're going to be revealed at this Xbox showcase where they unveil the Project or Series X. Setzer talked last week about how the Series X is a confusing name anyway, so I'm obviously going to trip over that a billion times. But do you have any predictions for this showcase? Do you think these will be revealed? Is there any other franchises you think will make a big comeback? I mean, outside of Halo.
I think I'm pretty confident that the Fable stuff is true. I think if you look at Microsoft's library, their first party library, which is pretty lacking in diversity,
They're trying
I
to change
think
that.
they are trying to change it. They bought a lot of people, but I think Fable would fill in that Western role playing niche I think they need to fill in. But I think that Fable has the British humor that
Oh
you
yeah,
just can't that you just can't beat.
the
And
Minister of Silly Walks. He finally made it.
uh, so I think they have to fill in their funny Cockney accents. They've got to fill that niche on the Series X. Prediction wise though, I don't know. I really am just personally hoping to see whatever Halo Infinite is. They've been so coy about this game that I think seems pretty pivotal to their ultimate success
I'll give you a
as
spoiler.
far
It's a
as the
Halo.
launch goes. But the way they talk about it makes it sound like it's got to be something a little bit more. And I think that's I've been thinking on this a lot because thinking about what's going to be the distinguishing factor this time with this generation, because every generation has had pretty easy things to like pick out, like why one ended up more successful in the Western market. You look back at the 360 and its online capabilities, alongside coming out a year early, alongside not being $600, made that like the clear winner. The PS4 was they had that E3 conference where they just totally pantsed Microsoft and made them look ridiculous. And so then it was obvious that they were going to run away with the Western market. And this one, I just don't see like a clear front runner.
Well, they need
And
to
I
come
was,
out strong.
yeah, well, that was what I was thinking is that like when you look at Microsoft's first party games now, they don't really, to me, feel like they ever made a true current gen, next gen game. Like you look at the PS4 and you're talking about Horizon, like that is a game that could not have really been done on the PS3 in
Yeah.
any way, shape, or form. When you look at the Microsoft side of things, like Halo 5 didn't really make waves with anybody. People liked the new Gears games, but the impression I've gotten is that they're gussied up Gears of War games at the end of the day. And I think Halo Infinite, and by extension the rest of Microsoft games, really need to show that they are invested in growing up, so to speak, and moving forward and doing something new, and not just what succeeded in the early 2000s and early 2010s.
For me personally, the reason I got an Xbox One X was because of how they embrace backwards compatibility. So what I want out of the Project X is expand on that. Like I want more original Xbox games playable. I want more 360 games playable. It's kind of nice not having to hook up a 360 or original Xbox to play some of
I,
these things.
I
Um,
think you'll be disappointed. I think they
Probably.
will. I think they are going to try and not talk about that in this. That's there. There's a prediction. I think they're going to try not to talk too much about that, because I think PlayStation is really pushing, or Sony is really pushing this narrative, because the PS5, those games are not backward. You cannot play PS5 games on a PS4, where
Right.
you can play some Series X games on an Xbox One. And so they're really playing up the idea that this is a clean break. This is a true next generation. And I think if Microsoft trots out like, hey, you can play both Blinks the Time Sweepers on the Xbox Series X, I think people are gonna be like, well, wait a minute, like that's cool. Like I like me some Blinks the Time Sweeper, and I'm a terrible person, but I really would like to know like what is new, what is fresh
Well, you could
about
have like a
this
five
platform.
minute, you could have like a minute long thing, like, oh, by the way, backwards compatibility is coming back. Moving on, and then that's it. That's what I want most out of Xbox because that's what set them apart from PlayStation for me. I play all my old games on Xbox and all the new stuff on PlayStation because as you
We'll see.
said, Microsoft first parties don't really interest me. But they could come out since they're working on that. They could come out of the gate and surprise us. I know that I was surprised that Yakuza 7 launches on Series
Yeah.
X and PS5. I think 5 people will buy that on Series X. I will be one of them. I'll be curious to see what they come out with.
Yeah, I think it's either going to be a total disaster, disappointment, where they maybe show Halo and it's kind of like that's it. Think back to like when they showed Breath of the Wild and that was all Nintendo had.
Yeah,
Or you're going to find out that all these studios they bought have been working on some really cool stuff.
that's got to be it. Because
So
I feel like from a first party perspective, they've done nothing for a couple years.
I'm hopeful that's the case, because I don't feel like anything has really made me super excited about this next generation. So seeing a really interesting lineup of new first party Game Pass games would really get me pretty psyched to get into that, continue to partake in that Xbox ecosystem.
Well, look forward to Crackdown 4 and bring Terry Crews back.
Oh, I do look forward to Crackdown 4.
So speaking of Xbox, there's this Summer Games Fest thing happening where it's kind of like E3 where you play like a bunch of demos, but they are available to all of us, like 60 games.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
this is a great idea because with this internet age, there's no reason why the consumer shouldn't be able to or at least a hardcore consumer shouldn't be able to like sample some of these games before they come out.
And didn't you feel like when the age of the internet was upon us with the 360 and the PS3, didn't you feel like this was the ultimate goal that we would eventually reach in the first place?
Yes,
Like I
I remember, and this is gonna make me sound like an idiot, but I remember when Smash Brothers Brawl was going like being demoed around, and Sonic was first revealed, and he was like being played at like an E for All Expo, and I remember going on forums and complaining, man, why can't I download this demo on my Wii? And now I'm thinking like, well, it's the Wii, that's why. But
Yeah,
um, but
that's
stuff
fair.
like that would be really neat. Like I feel like it's been a long time coming.
Yeah, I think the only hesitation I have with this concept, I really I wouldn't call it hesitation, but the only thing that really made me pump my brakes is like, right now there's not a complete list of the 60 games. But so far, the only game on the list that I would even consider trying is Destroy All Humans, which is a terrible game from a long time ago. I have a friend who really liked it, and I would probably play it just to do what everybody does in Destroy All Humans, which is goof around with the humans for 2 minutes with your crazy psychic powers, and then move on with your life. So I'm worried that a lot of the bigger first parties will be, or not first parties, but the bigger studios will be a little hesitant to put their stuff on there because you think a lot of the reason we probably haven't gotten these E3 demos is because they like having that curated media preview rather than unleashing their thing to the public who could ruin it before it even comes out. But I'm hopeful that since this is a Microsoft initiative, maybe they will put some of their work, whatever that may end up being, out for the public to see. That's the hope, at least.
Well, it is dangerous when you don't have some executive behind you telling you not to go down a certain path because it's going to crash the game.
Right.
So,
Yes.
so maybe
I
make
think
more
we've
invisible walls.
remembering what it was like to play with a PR person breathing down your neck. I'm gonna say that for them, that is the ideal environment in which you would play one of those demos. But maybe some of them will be a little altruistic and give us a little something here in the coming weeks.
You could put up invisible walls and there's a screen that says unavailable to access in beta or something like I think the player would understand. It's not like they're going like this is going to be what it's like in the final game. Nah, come
In actuality, it'll be only people who own a Kinect can play these demos. And you have to make sure your camera is on so that the PR person can see you through the camera and they can talk to you directly and tell you when you're doing something wrong.
Boy, imagine having a Connect in 2020. Can't
I
relate.
I wonder, does the One X, you have a One X, does it have a port for the Kinect?
I don't know. I haven't checked. I don't think it does.
It might, but I feel like it shouldn't.
No, I mean I know that I think I played Dead Rising 3 on it, and it still has Connect functionality. It'll stay like if you shout at the zombies or something, it'll shake them off. So
Oh boy, that is not a control mechanism I miss.
no. Well, I remember when I was standing in line for Mass Effect 3, some guy was talking about the Connect functionality for the game, and I remember thinking annoyed, like I just wish they didn't have any.
And you weren't wrong.
And now I'm wishing they didn't have Mass Effect 3 or 2, but I've talked about
We
that
can
already.
we can wish for things.
Yes, and speaking of things that we wish may not should exist, Fallout is coming to Amazon. How excited are you for Todd's recreation of the Fallout universe to hit the silver screen or whatever the hell the small screen's called?
If he's not involved, I feel like it has potential.
I've heard he's involved.
Well, then I'm gravely concerned
That's what my
because
wife said.
this this is a really confusing thing for me because I feel like I have never finished a Fallout game, never finished an Elder Scrolls game, not really in on my Bethesda first part or Bethesda releases. I feel like my impression has always been that the story of those games is lackluster, especially
Depends.
the ones that aren't made by Obsidian. So I think that a whole TV show dedicated to that universe could be spotty. However, that universe has potential, and I like Westworld, which is who the producers of Westworld are who are helming this show. So I guess I would say I'm very cautiously willing to recognize the existence of this program.
Well, how generous of you. I feel like if they just copied Fallout 3's story, it would be. I mean, I don't think Fallout 3 has got the greatest story in the world, but I think if you just copied that beat for beat, threw in a couple side missions as like filler episodes, that'd probably be fine.
You've played these games, you would say for sure that like the side stories are the actual narratives that anybody actually cares about in these games, right?
I know my wife really enjoys the Fallout 3 main scenario, and I think a lot of people do.
Okay,
People really like Liam Neeson. So
I see. Yeah, I,
uh,
I I know for sure. I might be projecting my thoughts or the thoughts on four, which I don't think was nearly as
fours
warmly received.
they should just ignore that story if they're going to look at developed games for that. Obviously, New Vegas is the way to go because it's got a lot of depth and there's a lot of things and moving parts going on. But Bethesda, they're very bitter about New Vegas, so that's not going to happen. So I know they're not going to go to Fallout 1 and 2, which both have good stories. So they're going to go to 3 if they're going to go direct. And I feel like that'd be fine. But they'd have to keep it pretty close.
It is a world that has some potential for sure, so it could be done well. Like I said, not too optimistic, but who knows? It could be worse.
Well, they're not going to base it off Fallout 76, I would imagine. So,
I would that they would have to do some really crazy trickery, like having the stream break for it to
well,
be a
they could
Fallout
they
76
could get
game.
meta with it and make it like that Final Fantasy 14 show from Netflix or whatever, where
Yeah,
it's about the
that
players and not the game.
yes, Dad of Light, which is a very good show. I would say I should add, and I was thinking about this when they announced this. This is a much better idea than an Elder Scrolls TV series because that I think would not have
Well,
any
people would
appeal.
just say they're trying to make Game of Thrones
Right, exactly. So this is a better route because there's plenty of shows that are post-apocalyptic, but
or The
this
Witcher.
does this does have its own unique slot that it fills in that regard.
So, speaking of Amazon, they're producing this Fallout show where they're
Mm.
unreleasing something too. Crucible.
Oh, oh,
Crucible was released in closed beta, I think, in
I
May at some
hardly knew
point.
it.
Yes, well, you're not alone because I believe the player base is, I don't know, like sub 400. It's small.
Oh,
It's
yeah. I will be honest. This was like at a time where I was not paying attention to really anything. So like when it came out, I remember hearing the name and I just kind of took for granted I thought it had been successful. And I gather that it is not successful.
there were apparently less than 150 players online pretty recently,
Oof,
which
we're
is
reaching Battleborn territory
yes,
here.
yes, we Battleborn 2 back in the
Oh,
saddle.
you want to say it's surprising, but I feel like every example of these big tech companies like Google and Amazon trying to enter the game industry, it always ends pretty similarly. They just kind of throw their money around and then they realize that there's more to it than that.
Well, not to get
And
all
then they have
pretentious
to,
about it, but I feel like these games are born with the purpose specifically to make money and aren't necessarily like they're
yes,
not putting the art first. So they're not
yes,
making games from a good idea. They're making games for specifically for monetary purposes. Whereas like the big companies, Sony, Nintendo, I feel like they started with a sense of passion for the game industry. It wasn't just about making money. That was part of it, but they had ideas, they had games, and they didn't like to have dollar signs and a game to build around the dollar signs.
yeah. And this is free to play, right? Or it was
I
free to
believe it
play.
was, yes. Well,
Yeah.
it was beta, so
It was, oh yeah, well, hopefully it was free to play. I know that they were saying that if you check in before a certain date, log in, you get to keep your access. But beyond that, I believe they're cutting off any new players. So the future does not look bright for Crucible
you
for now.
know, usually when games go down this route where they shut down for a while or have to retool, it's just over. Like they're just not coming back. The
Yeah.
one exception to the rule is pretty obvious. Everyone knows it. It's Final Fantasy 14, which became a massive success. But that is definitely not the example you should follow. That game really should have failed, and the fact that it came
No,
back is a miracle.
and it wasn't free to play. And there's so many of these free to play games pretty much every day
They
now
pop
that
up all the time.
they pop up, and if they go away, they don't tend to come back.
Well,
So
yeah, no one's gonna be like, "Oh man, remember that Crucible game? I can't wait till it comes back, and I bet it's gonna be good this time." I have a lot of faith in Amazon.
yeah, I feel for the people who put their heart into that and had it fail tremendously. And I hope that they land on their feet, and I'm hoping that if they're landing on their feet with Amazon, maybe Amazon brings in some people who have some kind of passion for the industry or some kind of know how to make something happen.
Well, I'm sure the people working on it had passion for that project,
Yeah,
but
oh, I'm sure they did, but at the same time, I'm sure there are a lot of people. I think Amazon, with the kind of money they command, they can probably walk up and get a lot of talented people, and maybe these maybe these people weren't totally fulfilled by this game that seems to you and me at least to be kind of an obvious money grab.
Amazon's just got so much money. I'm surprised they haven't tried to buy like Microsoft or Nintendo or something. Just
I
trust me, I don't want that to happen. But I'm surprised they
don't
haven't
give them
tried.
ideas. Don't give them
Yes.
ideas.
I just hope Jeff Bezos lets these people out of their cages, lets them back to their families. Like, this game's done. Do something
Yeah.
else.
Let, let these talented individuals work on something that truly inspires them,
Yes. True
hopefully.
inspiration brought to us by Naughty Dog in The Last of Us Part 2.
Oh, baby.
So, apparently, Naughty Dog's gotten a little bit sensitive about people criticizing their masterpiece, their Citizen Kane of gaming. Can you go into that a little bit?
It's kind of, to me, it seems a little unprecedented because there's always been the idea that publishers and media personalities can be a little cozy, right? Or that publishers try to exert some kind of influence on the people who review their games, but it's usually very discreet. But this is like out in front of people's faces. So a few of the things mentioned in this story, which comes from, it's sourced all over the place, but the specific story we're looking at comes from Polygon, and they're talking about, there was a big ordeal with a, uh, I don't know what to call him. I would call him an influencer who tweeted something very positive about The Last of Us 2, and then Jason Schreier from Bloomberg, formerly of Kotaku, criticized his comments, and then Neil Druckmann, who is the director on Last of Us 2, and Cory Barlog, who is the director of God of War, so not even related, but they kind of ganged up on him and came to their defense in a really weird way for their game. And this was short. This was the day that the reviews started to come out, and that was weird enough. But then the newest thing that came up in the story was, I don't know how to pronounce his name. I think it's Rob Zacny, who writes for Vice Games. He wrote a review that was pretty tepid on the game overall, and it criticized a lot of things about The Last of Us 2. And an email surfaced from a PR person from Naughty Dog to him that was like, "Hey, we don't really." It basically was like questioning his reasoning. It was calling into question his reasoning in his review, which is just kind of weird. Like, it's not unheard of for publishers to email or get in contact with media for things from their review. Speaking from experience, I've been contacted twice for reviews that I wrote in the past. One time from NBA 2K, I was told "good job" for my review,
Great.
which was nice. But they didn't criticize me, of course, and I gave it a good review.
Yeah, they
But
paid you
then,
under the table, but that's, another story.
well, I didn't want to mention that on here. And then there was Telltale for
Yeah.
Strong Bad. I reviewed the Strong Bad game, and they emailed me to tell me that their name was Telltale and not Traveler's Tales,
Oh, God.
because this was back in the day when Telltale was not quite as big, and one could be forgiven for mistaking them with Traveler's Tales, who made
Yeah.
plenty of delightful games in the late '90s and early 2000s.
Sonic R.
Um, yeah, exactly. So, a very forgivable mistake on my part, but that's the kind of stuff like that I think happens normally, and it's especially weird in this case because, like, I don't think there's many games that have come out to such unbelievable praise as The Last of Us 2. Like, reviewers tripping over themselves to call it a masterpiece. Why are they putting their thumb on the scale when it's already like registering so much in their favor? It's like they're pulling over their Rolls Royce to mug a baby. Like, I don't get it. Like,
Well,
what are they getting at?
well, I know they have a grudge against Jason Schreier because he exposed Naughty Dog for having like a horrible work culture and like that relied heavily on crunch. So they're
Hmm.
kind of bitter about that. So they're going to attack him for anything, which is scummy. I would say fix your business practices and don't blame the guy that pointed them out. It's strange that they think their project is beyond scrutiny. To say like a review is unfair, a review that gives a score of like a 6 out of 10 or something, is it's kind of silly. It comes across as thin-skinned because you have like yes, you do have people that are critical of it from major outlets. They're not many, but they do exist. But the overwhelming majority of talk about this game is just pure praise from the press. Like you have people saying it's one of the best games in ages, and
Yeah, and
to,
even the players, by and large, I mean, there is a contingent of people who there's a lot of really intolerable people who have their criticisms of the game. There are people who have very well reasoned criticisms of the game, but I feel like most of the things I've seen from players has been, I really like this game. So there's no need for Naughty Dog to sic some militant force on
it's a
these
mix.
two or three reviews. Yeah, I mean, there is a mix, but I feel like the communities I've wandered in, I've seen mostly positive vibes from it. Though of course, there is a negative contingent, but not enough that Naughty Dog needs to emerge from their slumber to be like, "Hey, whoa, whoa, what are
Yeah.
you doing?" Saying You wouldn't want anything bad to happen to your website, would you? Like, you know,
Well,
you wouldn't want to not get Uncharted 5, would you?
well, what bothers me is because I do see more of a disparaging opinion among fans than you've let on. I This is going to delve into a little bit of spoilers, so if you don't want to hear Last of Us 2 spoilers, move ahead. But their attempt at the Metal Gear Solid 2 plot twist with Abby instead of Raiden is got a pretty mixed reception. I hear a lot of people say they enjoy the parts of the game where you play as Ellie, but when you switch over to Abby, it becomes a little less tolerable, and they don't really enjoy that stuff to the point where I've seen a lot of people attack Laura Bailey, which is Abby's voice actress, and like send her death threats and stuff, which is ridiculous because it's not like she has control over what her character does in the game. That's silly. She didn't like say, "I want Abby to kill Joel." Sorry for that. As I said, spoiler. Yeah, it's not her call, so giving her death threats is silly. But I also feel like Naughty Dog will use those extreme people to mask criticism of the game itself. They'll say like this was a Gamergate thing or something, and ignore people with actual criticism. And I don't know.
Yeah,
It's
I,
frustrating.
I I think they've given the impression with this cycle that they are not open to criticism really at all. It seems like they have a chip on their shoulder, which is weird because I can't remember the last Naughty Dog game. I can. I think it was Jack 2 was the last Naughty Dog game that came out that people were like, I don't know about this. Everything else since then has been, even the first Uncharted, which is spotty in its own right, but there was a lot of like, oh, this has a lot of potential. Everything since then, Uncharted 2, 10 out of 10 game of the year in a lot of publications. Uncharted 3, flawed, but people still said, hey, this is still really polished, really great game. Uncharted 4, another game everybody loved, Last of Us 2, universal praise. So this chip on their shoulder is,
It's
it's
baffling.
really, it's strange, and it's, to me it's like really unbecoming because I'm a huge Uncharted fan. I have not played The Last of Us 2. I really like the first one. At some point I would like to play The Last of Us 2, though I have some trepidation just based on the tone of the game. But even for me, it's made me really question supporting them. And I have to imagine that there's probably a lot of people out there who are thinking a lot differently of them, which this a PR person instigated this mail to the Vice Games reviewer. And the job of PR would be to do the opposite of that, to not make people question your organization. So I think they definitely goofed up on this one. But before we move on from Last of Us 2, I do have to mention something.
Yeah.
I have to ask, totally, I don't want to go too far off the side, but I mentioned the tweet earlier that kind of was controversial. And the tweet, just for context, it was comparing The Last of Us 2 to Schindler's List.
Yeah.
And that was what Jason Schreier really jumped at. And a lot of people, I think, rightly jumped at it. I mean, I get what he was going for, but I think probably choose a better movie for your example here. But in his comparison, he said it's John Wick. Like every other game is John Wick, but this game is Schindler's List. But I don't know about you, but everything I've seen from other people, like the clips I've seen of this game, it kind of seems like the gameplay is the thing that people who like it really like. Like it looks like they've really polished up the mechanics of the first one, which was I personally liked it, but it was a little clumsy in places and made it in some cases kind of unpleasant to get through some sections. But like I was just watching this clip earlier that I found on Twitter, and it was just the most John Wick looking thing I'd ever seen, where Ellie is jumping off of second stories, stabbing guys in the heart, hitting them in the face with a wooden plank. And I looked at this like this looks kind of fun. And this is like not at all like everything I've heard has been this game is miserable. I hated it. It punched me in the face and took all my money, 10 out of 10. And this was like, oh, this actually looks like a fun video game. I don't know, what is your
Well,
sense on the the gameplay of this game? It kind of seems to me like it's a lot more fun than I was let on to believe.
well, I wasn't a big fan of how The Last of Us 1 played. It was actually the worst part of the game. I enjoyed everything but that. I especially enjoyed the giraffe segment. That was cool as hell. But I'm sure it plays okay. But that's not why people go to that game. They're not going
No,
to the game for the gameplay.
but it was just weird. It was kind of jarring for me because so many of those earlier reviews were about how miserable it was and how much they didn't enjoy it. But everything I've seen, like on social media posts where people are sharing clips and stuff, is like, I really enjoy the gameplay of this. It's like, I don't really like the story because they've really messed it up. But man,
Well,
is it kind of fun to play, which is so
well,
weird.
well, not to get into this for the third straight week, but there is a disconnect between critics and the audience, and I feel like the critics understand that this what the game is going for is depressing, dire. They have a dog that someone played fetch with once and you killed it, so that's supposed to make you sad. So you're not supposed to point out that the gameplay is good and that it can be fun at times. You're supposed to mention how it's sad and depressing and it is
But
an
see, the
enjoyable game.
to me, the dog thing adds like, no, I don't hate dogs, but I'm saying like it's so corny, it's so over the top. And the fact that every NPC has a name, so they'll shout out like, "Oh, you got Steve." Like
Right.
the idea like that combined with what looks like really polished mechanics. I'm like, this looks like a really fun game to like sit down with in the evening with a drink and just kind of laugh about.
It
Like
is corny, but
it's
you
so
know that's not what they
weird.
were going for.
Oh,
They
no,
weren't
I mean,
going
I
for that. They were going for let's make you
no.
feel sad.
No, their
And
tone
that's
was
what
very clear.
and as Schreier pointed out, which has taken way too long for someone in the media to actually reference, the game's press is a little too chummy with the publishers. So I think that they knew the publishers did not want to mention that it's kind of corny. So they went with this is dark and brooding and serious and unfun.
Yeah, I mean, and just to that's a perfect place to kind of wrap it up in a bow. If you are cozy with the publishers, you probably don't want it to get out like this, and I feel like the publishers kind of really dropped the ball here. Like
Well,
they
I
kind
do
of
too.
just let the cat out of the bag there, which is this is not a good look. And if there isn't a really chummy relationship, you really messed up because this does not make it look good, I don't think.
No. No, it doesn't. So going on, games might be more expensive in the next generation.
Oh,
$70 instead of 60, and this is based on 2K's pricing for their basketball game for next year is $70 on the Series X and PS5. My thoughts on this is that I'm not shocked 2K is the company that come out and do this. A lot of other companies are releasing games on Series X that are free if you own the Xbox One version of it, like it's just a free upgrade. But 2K, their basketball game, which generates a ton of money despite being mediocre every year since. When was their good one? When was the one that like put them on the map, like 2K13?
NBA 2K?
Yeah, there was like one good one that blew everyone out of the water.
Well, I think it really started the one that first initiated it was when they sold their games for $20. It was 2K5,
That's
I believe.
football.
No, no, that was also basketball. I believe it was
Really?
either 2K4. Yes, they was the same year. They came out strong with basketball. That was the first time it started. Like that was when we got on board,
But there was
and
like a big one, like
the big one was 2K11. That was when they had Jordan on the cover, and they
okay.
had the legacy mode. That was where, at least to my sensibilities, like it was the dominant basketball game at that time, but that was the game that really like put it over the top.
Well, I remember like people were talking about it being one of the best sports games ever made, and I feel like
Right.
2K has completely coasted on from that point on. I think 2K is one of the greediest publishers alive.
If I was the rest of the industry, say the ESA, to me this is like a total. I hate to make this reference because at this point it is beyond hackneyed, but it is a total Leroy Jenkins situation
That is hackneyed.
because set yes it is, but $70 is kind of a big. It's going to be a big deal. Like whenever it happens, and I think a lot of us feel like it's kind of inevitable. It's not going to be a positive reaction. So you have to think, what's the best way to do this? And I think 2K is the Leroy in the situation, and they are just running in because I cannot think of a game and a publisher that would be worse to do this. Because if you think about these
EA.
2K games, no, no, I think this is worse because, like you said, very highly acclaimed series over the years. But over the past several years, it has become so burdened with microtransactions. Every review will mention how they have made the experience almost impossible to enjoy without having to pay extra, whether that's playing the My Career mode to advance your individual player, or I believe even playing like the association or the franchise equivalent. I believe even that is inundated with enough microtransactions that it is just extremely unappealing. And so the idea that they would charge $70, and they're not getting rid of that.
No, they're
They're
not.
not getting rid of that. So it's like, is this really the best first example for the $70 price tag? Like, if
No.
I'm every other publisher, I am fuming that these are the people who got out first. Like, I'd be thinking, man, I hope maybe the first big Spider-Man game on the PS5 gets this $70 price tag, or the next Naughty Dog project, or Halo Infinite. But this game, I it boggles the mind that this is the first one.
My little
Uh,
conspiracy theory is that 2K just was like, we need to charge more, so we need to immediately set the standard, and other publishers will follow us.
yeah,
So
and
it's sort of,
the unfortunate thing is I think it'll work out because I think 2K at this point is one of those series like Madden used to be, where people that is the game they buy and that's it.
even though they
And so
acknowledge it is microtransaction hell.
yeah, even though
Everyone I
they'll
know that
tell you,
plays
yeah,
2K says it's
absolutely.
bad.
Everyone will tell you that stuff is rotten, and yet they buy it year after year, right? So
Right.
I don't think it's kind of like the WWE games. We have a friend who buys them every year, and he'll tell you they're terrible, but it's one of the only games they buy. And so that behavior is not really going to change because in the case of the NBA, not the WWE, the core is so solid. The
Yeah,
foundation is the
definitely not the
foundation is so
WWE.
no. The foundation is so solid that there's no other basketball game, so what are you going to do? For the people who are not sold on the $7 price tag, I think this is all but solidifying that it's a done deal at this point because I think this is probably going to work out.
Well, to give you an idea of how much like we used to trust 2K, we're both longtime fans of the WWE video game franchise. So we were pretty excited when 2K got the rights because we were like, well, the basketball games are pretty well regarded, and we believe they're going to put their best foot forward and release some good products. Well, I don't know if you've been following the WWE games, but if you at least know of WWE 2K20, you know that is not the case. That is year after year the laziest possible release.
I just thought of something worse than 2K NBA 2K being the first $70 game, and it
W
was it was the next WWE game being
Oh,
thank
imagine the
goodness
goal.
thank goodness there's none this year. But
Can you
if they
imagine
I no, I can't
with a
imagine
straight
because
face? Like we rented 2K20 to play just because.
we are masochists and
Yes,
we truly loathe ourselves. That's why we played Fusion Frenzy at one point, and that is why we played WWE
you
2K20.
can't talk about Fusion Frenzy like that. You'll get people on your back. Hey,
That's true.
everyone, Fusion Frenzy is not good. I don't care what your childhood tells you. That game is bad.
If you're
Um,
sitting there at home thinking you like Fusion Frenzy and you
you're
want to tell
wrong.
us about it, you need to stop and you need to reconsider that and play it again, maybe, and then maybe you'll see, maybe. But
Maybe.
something I think you're kind of burying here, which a lot of people I think buried. If you really dig into that story, the big thing for me when I saw the price jump, because I think this is specifically for the Xbox version right now. It said on the Xbox One it'll be 60, on the Xbox One X it'll cost 70. So, as someone who's followed, all the news about the Xbox One X and smart delivery, their system for keeping your purchases consistent between the systems, when I
Mhm.
heard that, I was like, wait a minute. Well, what if you buy the Xbox One version? Do you not get a Xbox Series X version? Do you have to pay a little bit extra? So I'm like, okay, maybe you pay like a $10 pass or something, and then you can play it on both. But
Nope.
no, it's not even that. It's you have to buy an $100 version of the game, the Black Mamba version, which is a
That is offensive.
which is especially distasteful because yeah, as you know, and probably I'm guessing if you're stumbling on this podcast, maybe not a huge basketball fan, Black
This
Mamba
is
was
this
the
was
nickname.
huge news. They would have to know about this.
Maybe, but Black Mamba was the name of Kobe Bryant, who unfortunately passed earlier this year. So it's one of those situations where not only are they probably like, I feel like the $10 pass to get the next gen version probably would have been very reasonable. The $100 is a little bit of a slap in the face, and then putting it behind a quote unquote memorial for a deceased player, like exploiting his memory, because a lot of people really were affected by that. Like that's just
Tons.
so it is so scummy,
Well, it's
like
not
in
the first time
every
they've
layer.
they have a proud tradition of doing this in the WWE franchise. Like I remember,
They
like the
do.
year
They do.
Roddy Piper passed away, he was premium DLC. Or same with Dusty
Yeah.
Rhodes. I sometimes tweet at them because I'm a masochist and I like getting abuse from their fans. But I was like, this is a little insensitive. Like they just died. Like and they're like, well, it was always the plan. So, well, yeah, if it was always the plan, change the plan. I mean,
Yeah. Plan. Have you heard
plans
WWE
change,
plans change?
right?
Yes.
So
I think, yeah, obviously, hey, it's a basketball game. You should pay tribute to one of the greatest players of all time. Maybe
absolutely.
have a mode where you play through some of his moments, but to put him, his face, his memory on this $100 version of the game that is also on top of being, probably extremely overpriced. The only way that someone could, I'm sure it's a niche situation that anybody's going to want to play them on One X and Series X, but still, it's not. To me,
But there will be people like that.
to me, it is like the least consumer friendly thing I can possibly imagine. And I was just so gobsmacked
Well,
by the audacity.
yes, the audacity of it. Given that Cyberpunk, a game that costs way more to make than the yearly basketball game, way
Yes,
more, has the free upgrade.
yes. And you
Like
have to assume a lot of games are. I feel like the
Yakuza
impression
7
I've
has one, for goodness sakes.
Yeah, the impression I've gotten is that a lot of games are going to follow suit. Definitely all of Microsoft's first party stuff. So, and they're saying $10. It's $10 more because of there's all these changes to the next gen version. So they're charging $10 for Sweat, is what it sounds like,
But
which is it's
every
just
single
ludicrous.
damn trailer 2K puts out involves new feature Sweat every time since like the
Yeah.
360 days.
So I think we've really soured on 2K over the past few years,
Well, I
and
think they're scummy. They're every
this
bit as bad as EA.
this has not made it any better, and I think if I'm every other publisher, I'm sending them hate mail for
Yes.
make immediately making the $70 price tag, which was already going to get pushback, making it even less appealing to the regular person. Like,
Well,
come on.
as I said last week, if you want to get cynical, the $70 price tag is here, and it's called deluxe editions. So,
It's true. No, we have been paying, people have been paying $70 for games for a long time now. Now it's a little more naked, and it's like the worst. This they should put some clothes on.
yes, they need to step it back. This is like when EA got all bully about microtransactions. Well, we've always said the WWE games don't get enough pushback, and finally 2K20 came out, and it finally got pushback. So maybe 2K will get more media pushback now.
But I know that I definitely saw a lot of player pushback.
Well, I know you probably saw
Definitely,
it on Reddit, your favorite website.
I I loathe Reddit, but I knew when that was announced, I knew there would be a lot of, and there was a bunch of meltdowns and people posting their long stories like why this is unjust, why it doesn't justify the $70 price tag, and all that stuff, which I'm inclined to agree with, especially in this case. But man, it's gonna be rough for them. So I really hope it fails.
What I
I'm
hope they
doubtful
do
that it will.
is they try to charge $70 for the Switch ports of those games to match the next gens.
Uh,
Would that
yeah,
surprise you?
I would love. Well, the Switch does typically get games that are way overpriced, so it would not
I
surprise me.
mean,
But
it'll run
man,
at 240i, but
I think that would be pitchforks and everything pointed in 2K's direction.
good. Well, I think that'll about do it for this week. What did you think of your first week on the show there, Chesten?
It was a lot of fun. It's been a long time since I have done anything close to this, and it has been nice to get back into that rhythm, and hopefully I'll have a few more chances to shake off some of that rust
Yeah, I hope so
if
too.
you all will have me back at some point.
Yeah, we would love to. I know Setzer is back next week allegedly, but you are more than welcome to come on any show you want. But
Yeah, I'm sure everybody who listens would love to hear me talk about the next Clubhouse game that I'm going to indulge in. Hot takes about Richi Mahjong or Gomoku or what have you. Whatever the audience would like, I will play. I'll play some bowling, and I can talk about bowling.
we need the dad perspective. Setzer's pointed this out before, and
It is.
whenever you get around to playing Dragon Quest 11 and the I don't know next 6 years, it'll be interesting to hear your thoughts on that game. So,
I look forward to getting to it in the next 6 years, and then by the time I finish it, there'll be a 20 or 200-hour Dragon Quest 12.
but you can reach us via Twitter at allofthedaypod. You can also reach us via email at allofthedaypodcast@gmail.com. And for Chesten, this is Derek, and we are signing out. Talk to you next week. Bye.
See ya.